I just really want to ask you about the election, Professor Chomsky. Could you take a couple of extra minutes? And just because I think what you're saying is extremely important. And sometimes in the popular conversation, things unfortunately get a bit, I don't know what the right way to frame it is. But if we have an understanding that America is deeply corrupt, has profound institutional problems, that the structure of capitalism produces all of these outcomes, in contrast with, say, a kind of mainstream Democratic Party, MSNBC narrative that sort of says, hey, Trump created all of the problems under the sun and everything else. Now, this is something that particularly younger people, and definitely people in this audience, are going to be very familiar with this critique and this understanding, and it's a correct one. But I also fear, and I really appreciate that you just highlighted that, and I'm wondering if you could just take a few extra minutes to explain that even as that is true structurally, that what Donald Trump is doing institutionally actually is unique and does matter on its own terms, quite apart from the sort of evasions of the Democratic Party and the kind of mainstream liberal establishment.
Well, Trump is actually, this sounds strong, but it's true. He is the worst criminal in human history. Undeniably. There has never been a figure in political history who was dedicated with passion to destroying the prospects for organized human life on Earth in the near future. That is not an exaggeration. People are focused now on the protests, on the pandemic. They're bad enough. The pandemic is serious enough. We will emerge from it at terrible cost. The cost is greatly amplified by the gangster in the White House who's killed tens of thousands of Americans. So it'll be I'm making this the worst place in the world in response to it. But we will emerge. We're not going to emerge from another crime that Trump is committing. The heating of the globe, global heating, global roasting, which it's coming to. We're not going to emerge from that. It's a very serious business. The Arctic ice sheets are melting. They're not going to recover. That leads to an exponential increase in global warming. Antarctic glaciers are melting, could flood the world. Recent studies indicate that on the present course, in about 50 years, much of the habitable part of the world will be unlivable. People won't be able to live in South Asia, parts of the Middle East, and parts of the United States. Sea level. We're approaching a point of 125,000 years ago, when sea levels were about 25 feet higher than they are now. I think it's worse than that. A recent study by one of the top climate scientists concluded that the Scripps Oceanographic Institute, which monitors particles in the universe, CO2 particles in the atmosphere, they're the main monitor, just came out with a study showing that, of course, there's steady increase and escalating increase. And they estimated that we're coming ominously close to a point 3 million years ago when sea levels were 50 to 80 feet higher than they are today. Now, all around the world, countries are trying to do something about it. Some pretty much, some not enough, but at least something. There's one country which is led by a president who wants to escalate the crisis, to race toward the abyss, to maximize the use of fossil fuels, including the most dangerous of them, and to dismantle the regulatory apparatus that limits their impact. There is no crime like this in human history. Okay? Nothing. This is a unique individual. And it's not that he doesn't know what he's doing. Of course he does. So when it comes time to, when his golf course in Ireland is threatened by rising sea levels. He or whoever manages things for him knows enough to petition the government of Ireland to build a seawall because of rising sea levels. It's just he doesn't care. If he can pour more profit into the pockets of his rich constituency tomorrow, and him as well, who cares if the world disappears in a couple of generations? There's been nothing like this in the past. I mean, I should say that as far as the government is concerned, we're seeing something pretty interesting. A parliamentary democracy has been around for 350 years. Started in England in 1689 when so-called Glorious Revolution, when sovereignty was transferred from royalty to the parliament. So beginnings of parliamentary democracy. The United States, about a century later. It's not, parliamentary democracy is not just based on laws and constitutions. In fact, the British Constitution is maybe a dozen words. It's based on trust and good faith, the assumption that people will act like human beings. So take Richard Nixon, very rotten guy, but when the time came he had to leave office, he left office quietly. Nobody's expecting that with Trump. He doesn't act like a human being. It's off somewhere else. Call it what, so I'll leave it to the psychiatrist to say what it is, but it's plain that it's there. And what he has done is crush the executive office is practically destroyed. He doesn't even make appointments that can be confirmed by the Senate. Why bother? I'll just make appointments. If I don't like somebody, I'll throw them out. One Republican, Lisa Murkowski, dares to raise a small question about his nobility. Came down on her like a ton of bricks. I'm going to destroy you. I'm going to devote myself to destroying you. It's not fascism. It's what I said before. Tin pot dictator of some small neo-colony where they have coups every couple of years. That's the mentality. We're concerned about vaccines. Okay, there was a chief scientist in charge of vaccine production. He raised some questions about one of Trump's quack medicines. Out. You know, it's the executive branch is nullified. Congress, the Senate, happens to be in the hands of a soulmate of his, Mitch McConnell. In many ways, the real evil genius of this administration, dedicated to destroying democracy long before Trump. When Obama was elected, after a couple of years, Republicans have a Senate majority. McConnell said openly, publicly, my main goal is to ensure that Obama can achieve nothing. Okay, that's saying I want to destroy parliamentary democracy, which is based, as I said, on good faith and trust and interchange. The Senate is now so-called world's greatest deliberative body. It's reduced to two things: passing legislation that'll enrich the very rich and empower the corporate sector, and massive judicial appointments to stack the judiciary with young, ultra-right, mostly incompetent justices who can ensure for a generation that no matter what the public wants, they'll be able to block it. It's kind of like the Republican effort to suppress the vote, keep people from voting, all the rest. I mean, it's a deep hatred of democracy and fear of democracy. That's not unusual among elites. They don't like democracy for obvious reasons. But this is something special. As I say, 350 years of parliamentary experience are really being put to the test. That's on top of the pandemic, on top of the global warming crisis, crisis of nuclear weapons, which is equally severe. Trump is dismantling the entire arms control regime, greatly increasing the threat of destruction to us, virtually inviting adversaries to develop weapons that could destroy us, that we can't stop. I mean, but of course, with great euphoria in military industry, they love it, getting huge contracts. What's wrong? I mean, it's a unique position, but you say, as you say, it's not just Trump. It's Trump taking the worst aspects of the capitalist and particularly neoliberal version of capitalism and amplifying them. You can see it in, let's just take the pandemic. Why is there a pandemic? In 2003, after the SARS epidemic, which was a coronavirus, it was well understood by scientists, and they were saying another coronavirus, much more serious than this, is very likely. Here are the steps we have to take to prepare for it. Somebody has to take the steps. Well, there is a pharmaceutical industry, extraordinarily wealthy, huge labs, can't do it. Capitalism. You don't spend money on something that might be important 10 years from now. Stopping a future catastrophe is not profitable. We'll do what we can sell tomorrow. So that's a capitalist crisis. They're out. What about government? They have the resources, they have great labs, but then comes something like called Ronald Reagan, at the beginning of the neoliberal assault on the population. Government is the problem, not the solution, meaning we have to take decisions away from government, which has a serious flaw. It's influenced by people. Now we have to put them in the hands of unaccountable private institutions which have no influence from the public. Then everything will be great. In the United States, that's sometimes called libertarianism. Interesting concept. But just get it out of any public influence, just for the rich and powerful. That's the beginning of the neoliberal assault. And he and Thatcher at the same time. They both knew or else their advisors knew what they were doing. First step, destroy unions. First step for both of them, because they're the basis, main basis for a public response. So if you can get rid of them, you've enhanced the destruction of democracy and the transfer of power to the very few. I don't have to go through the details of what's happened since. But the big pharma was out, capitalism, government is out, neoliberalism. Nevertheless, the government could do something. The first Bush, H.W., had established a presidential scientific advisory council board. Obama called it into office practically the first day of his administration, asked them to prepare a pandemic warning reaction system. A couple of weeks later, they came back with a system, was put in place. January 2017, the wrecker comes into office. First days of his administration, dismantle the whole system to respond to the pandemic. Started defunding the Center for Disease Control, every health-related aspect of government, year after year. Eliminated programs of American scientists in China, working with Chinese scientists to identify potential coronavirus threats. Just throw it out. So when it finally hit, the United States was uniquely unprepared, thanks to the wrecker. And then it got worse. He refused to react to it. Other countries responded, some of them very well, very quickly. It's almost gone, largely under control. Not the United States. He didn't care. For months, U.S. intelligence couldn't get to the White House to say there's a serious crisis. And finally, according to reports, he noticed that the stock market was declining. Doesn't like that, so we have to do something. What he's done since is just chaos in the United States. But again, a large part of the problem is pre-Trump. So why aren't the hospitals ready? Well, they run on a business model. That's neoliberalism. You have to be just on time delivery. We don't want to lose a cent. So we don't have an extra hospital bed. We have to make sure that the owners of the CEOs of the private hospitals get millions of dollars a year in compensation. Can't have an extra bed, which we cut into that. So everything's pared to the bone. Nursing homes, which are privately owned, are reduced to minimal functioning because we can make more money that way if we're a private equity corporation that owns them. Now we can contribute to Trump's campaign, so he can have a photo op with us telling us how wonderful you are for destroying the nursing homes and killing all the elderly people. That's what we're living with. So yes, it goes deep into issues well before Trump, but he's a unique phenomenon. Again, the worst criminal in human history. Some of his minor crimes are to destroy American democracy and to create a pandemic, to amplify a pandemic, just killing tens of thousands of people because of him. But those are minor crimes by his standards. We should recognize we're living in a unique moment of human history. Very striking. Everything's coming together. And I'm afraid I have another appointment.
All right. Well, Professor Chomsky, I think you answered the question about voting, as we say, strategically in this election. I think you outlined the reasons there extremely clearly. And I remember President Trump saying when he cut the pandemic office, he said, "I don't like to waste money." Anyways, Professor Chomsky, thank you very, very much for doing this. And we wish you all the best and stay safe. Thank you.
You just watched a Michael Brooks show video. Subscribe to get them all. Why wouldn't you? Don't be foolish. Click subscribe below and become a patron as well. Patreon.com/TMBS. Thanks, everybody.